It's the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David welcomes historian and educator Anderson Flen, singer-songwriter Woody Bradshaw, and, as always, the Mo Giles Band. It's the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David welcomes historian and educator Anderson Flen, singer-songwriter Woody Bradshaw, and, as always, the Mo Giles Band. Now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome to everyone at home and in our studio audience to the weekly show. I am your host, David J. Maloney, and to our right, the Mo Giles Band. It has been reported that heiress Abigail Disney has recently gone undercover at Disneyland to investigate working conditions. It turns out she was very, very upset with what she found. After interviewing the 7 dwarfs, she found out only 1/7 of them were happy. Russian journalist Sergei Dernenko, a critic of President Putin, has recently passed away at the age of 59. The cause of death? Being a critic of President Putin. A Chinese automaker has unveiled the world's most expensive SUV. It's called the Karlman King, with a price tag of $19 million, plus another $300 for undercoating. Did you hear about this boy in New Jersey? He got stuck in a claw machine. One of those iron claw machines that you see in an arcade. It didn't turn out bad. I mean, he was eventually freed, but it did take $100 in tokens. If you've never seen the weekly show before, please keep watching. We typically feature one local guest who is somebody you'd like to know more, maybe you already know, and one big name guest. First up, we have someone the Alabama Historical Commission considers a natural treasure himself, Mr. Anderson Flen. He's here to talk about the recent find of the last slave ship to America, the Clotilda. After that, we have our permanent guest, musical guest for the month of August. Woody Bradshaw is here to chat about his upcoming album, and we got so much more. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Our first guest tonight is here to talk about an extremely exciting topic, the finding of the last slave ship to America, the Clotilda. Anderson Flen is a native of Africatown and one of its leading historians and activists. Please give a warm weekly show welcome to Mr. Anderson Flen. So, Anderson, for those who don't already know about you, please tell us about yourself.
Well, like you said, my name is Anderson Flen. I was born and raised in Africatown. Africatown is a community that was where the last Clotilda slave ship came. I left Africatown in 1968 once I graduated from high school. Went to school in Virginia, graduate school in North Carolina, lived in Atlanta, and have been going back to Africatown all of my life, but have really intensified it over the last 20 years to reestablish and work with our community.
Now, you were born in Africatown, right?
Right.
And that's one of the most historically significant African-American heritage sites in America.
Absolutely.
How did your family end up there?
Well, my family ended up there My father came down from the Hope Hurl area. Let's share a couple of things with you about Africatown in terms of the community and also in terms with the Clotilda. As you know, the Clotilda was based on a bet by a rich family in Mobile to smuggle a ship into Mobile. The slave trade, international slave trade, had been abolished in 1807.
So none of them were supposed to be coming in at all?
None of us were be coming in at all. Slavery was still existing, but none of us were be coming in at all.
So it was essentially smuggling?
It was smuggling in. And they betted that they could smuggle them in and get away with it to a large extent. And interesting enough, the captain of the ship that they recruited to do the smuggling is from Mississippi, Captain Foster. He was one of the best captains around, and so they got that particular captain. But the interesting thing about that community is that 110 slaves or enslaved individuals came, all of them 19 years and younger. So you're talking about children who were who brought to the community. Of those 110, only about 20 or 30 families, about 20 of them or 25 of them remained in that community. 10 of them were given to Captain Foster to bring to Mississippi. Others were sent other places in Alabama.
So was that like his payment? He got to have 10 of them?
That was part of his payment in terms of that particular act, in terms of doing that. I bring that up because of those other 70 plus individuals, we don't know where they went, who they are, and so some of us could be direct descendants of them and not know it because the history of that particular illegal act was created. Just recently in Selma, Alabama, they thought that the oldest person that died was Joe Lewis, who grew up who was in the Africatown community in 1935. But it was actually a lady by the name of Rhodesia who died in 1937. And they just found that out. So our history is we're trying to rediscover our history now and try to identify where those individuals are, as well as try to rebuild our community.
Speaking of which, what was it like in the community when you were growing up?
When I was growing up, our community is surrounded 3 parts by water. And we were actually sheltered from the greater Mobile because of where our community is located at. Our community had its own form of government. It had stores, restaurants, laundromats, movie theaters. Everything was pretty much ran by blacks from that community. They started the first church, which still exists now in terms of Union Baptist Church. They started the first school, which is the Mobile County Training School, which still exists now. That was started in 1880. So the community was self-contained, and the community was self-governed by the community itself.
So because they didn't know where everybody ended up going, it's not like there's anybody where you can trace any direct family descendants to particular slaves, or can you? You can trace direct families. The individuals that we knew who were in the Africatown community, we have traced them directly back to Africa in terms of a direct link there. Now, I understand that you went to the storied Mobile Training School. Well, it's Mobile County Training School, correct?
Correct.
And that has a fascinating story to it, doesn't it?
It's a remarkable story, the Mobile County Training School. It was started by the descendants of the Clotilda in 1880, and it became the first public high school for blacks in Mobile. And so it graduated a great deal of blacks in Mobile. There are 2 other interesting things about Mobile County Training School that I think are very, very important. It was student-led, and what that meant is that they set that school up so that the students would be in power. I was president of the student bodies 2 years in a row. We had a senate. We had the boys were our marshals of police. The girls were our big sisters in terms of the decorum and things for the girls. But more importantly, we made decisions on a lot of issues pertaining to the students in terms of disciplinary, judicial things. I had my own office as a president of the student body in the administration building.
So it was kind of self-disciplined.
It was self-disciplined. It was based on the
self-policed, essentially.
It was self-disciplined, self-policed in terms of the community. The community was set up that way, where the community was self-policing. The community, the church, and the school all worked together. For many years, in order to be in good standings at school, you had to get a report card sent to school on Monday morning from the superintendent of the church you went to, in order to be good standing with the school. So that's how connected that community was.
Now, let's go back to the Clotilda a little bit. The last slave ship to America, as we were talking about earlier, you were at least partially involved in that, correct?
Correct.
How so?
Well, I was, prior to the Clotilda being actually discovered, we were working with the National Park Service to develop a blueway that would highlight certain significant parts on the waterway of our community. Mm-hmm. As you may know, our community is surrounded 3 parts by water, and everything took place on the water in terms of eating, fishing, baptisms, and so we were in the process of identifying and highlighting those historical marking places. When the Clotilda was discovered, we reached out to the Alabama Historical Commission and indicated to them that we needed as a community to be involved in this process in every aspect of it. And everything that took place, they needed to come to the community and ask for permission from the community to be a part of this here. Because as you know, those 110 enslaved individuals brought there against their will. And so in order for us to start the healing process, we needed to have a renewed way in which we did things. And so we reached out to them and they agreed that every action that would be taken towards the Clotilda would be brought to us so that we would could sign off on it.
What does it mean for Africatown for the Clotilda to have been found?
I think it's several things. Number one, it was for many years, there were certain people in the community who were probably responsible for that ship being brought there, denying that it ever existed. The fact that that ship was found, the fact that we can document that it was found, proves that what our foreparents told us was true. The other thing is that it opens an opportunity for Mobile to begin to look at how does it heal itself, black and whites, with this particular discovery. So I think it's a great opportunity for all of us in this process.
Would you like to see the ship excavated and housed in Africatown in some way?
Absolutely. I think it will be a treasure for the city. I think it will be an educational piece for the community and for young people. Our community, unfortunately, is not being told the true history of African Americans. African Americans have created so much in terms of a contribution to the world, mm-hmm. and contribution to this community, but it's not being told. And so I think this ship would open that door to education.
To what end do you want the world and our nation to know more about Africatown, and how can they or we best support the work that's going on there right now?
I think there are several things that can happen. Number one, we need as you know, Africatown, like many minority communities, are inundated with industry. And that industry has not necessarily been hefty to Africatown. We've had so many persons with cancer and so on. The industry, sure, they've offered jobs to a number of individuals, including many African Americans, but they really have not been good neighbors in terms of preserving and respecting the tradition of that community and the history of that community. And so I would encourage industry to begin to recognize, appreciate, and respect and work as partners in that community. I would also encourage the world to help us tell this story so that it helps everybody. You see, because when you begin to hide information, everybody's ignorant. Blacks, white, and everybody else is ignorant with the process. When you start telling the truth, you free yourself, And so that's the whole thing. I want the world to begin. I want us to begin to understand what freedom truly is. And freedom is about truth and knowledge.
It's true. Very true. Anderson, thank you so much for your time with us today. Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
We'll be right back after these messages. Our second guest tonight is a special talent and a local boy. From acting to making music, Woody Bradshaw has seen it and done it all. His recent anthem for the Blue Angels has recently gone viral, and he'll be giving us an exclusive performance at the end of the night. Please give a warm Weekly Show welcome to my friend, Woody Bradshaw. Woody, where do you call home now?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I was actually born in a little town next door to here called Pascagoula, which I'm sure everybody knows. And my parents are from a little town called Loosedale. So a lot of my heritage. My cousins live in Gulfport. Another one's in Ocean Springs. And then we moved to Pensacola. And so that's where I call home. But I live in Nashville right now. That was complicated.
So you grew up on the Gulf Coast.
Yes.
And any stories stick out to you from being here?
Well, Mississippi, I mean, just being here, I want to talk about that a little bit because my grandparents had a little summer home in Gulfport. Mm-hmm. And so we used to come here. My cousins, I stayed with him last night. He's in Ocean Springs. And we'd go to their little summer home on the lake and eat ice cream, make homemade ice cream and watermelon. And so I love it down here.
So how did your music career start?
Well, I actually started as an actor. My brother was kind of the Elton John of the family, and I was much younger than him. And so I would just sing along, so no one knew I had really any talent because I was kind of an athlete. I played football and tennis. And then I became an actor. So I went to New York and had a career in that. And then as I grew older, I just started writing poetry and I had all this musical influence from my brother and my mom. She was an English teacher, drama. And anyway, it just started pouring out of me and everybody was like, who is this? Is this our son? So it was kind of interesting.
Who would you say were your musical influences getting into the business? And are they the same now?
Well, like I said, I had my brother who turned me on to like great singer-songwriters, like James Taylor, Carole King, like the old school. Mm-hmm. And then my mom was like, she taught school and she would take the Rolling Stone album, she would use it to teach. And so she turned me on to Chris Christopherson. So that's where my country bent came from. And then I love melody and I found my own way, so I loved Chicago, I love those kind of bands too. And you kind of have the Peter Cetera thing going on a little bit there. I haven't heard that one ever. Keith Urban every day, but not Peter Cetera.
From the acting thing, any crazy stories from your time on the set there?
Yeah, actually I have this is kind of funny because I got a big manager once I got on and I thought, this is not me. I never even want to do a soap. But when I got on it, it was scary because it's like, the material's not as good and it's on tape and you got to learn it like that. So there's no, so you need a craft to do it. But at first I just judge what you see, but when I got on it, there was this guy that I shared a dressing room with. And anyway, and I thought, like, this guy's never going to go when he wasn't even a soap opera looking. Anyway, that turned out to be Bryan Cranston from Mad Men. And now he's like soap opera he's like the new De Niro, But he was awesome. He was we'd actually run into each other on the street. He was always like a mentor, like on auditions, telling me, some tips.
It's cool when you got somebody like that who, especially a talent like that,
right,
to give you tips and stuff.
Yeah.
So you wrote an anthem for the Blue Angels.
Yes.
And that thing went crazy viral recently, didn't it?
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What made you want to come up with that song? What inspired you, I guess?
Well, like I said, I'm from Pensacola. That's home. And I wrote an anthem for the city first, and then somebody said, it'd be I would like to use the Pensacola song as the anthem for Pensacola, to kind of make it official. And then I thought the next thing would be the Blue Angels, and I thought, but that's pretty daunting because you got to be as big as they are in that song, like Danger Zone, for Top Gun. And anyway, and I just dabbled with it, and I thought I may even need a co-writer, but I came up with The Blues Are Back in Town. And it just wrote itself and got a great production. It introduced me back to my initial producer in LA because I moved to New York to LA as an actor, found music in LA. And the guy who I did my initial demos with, he's now a big shot.
And you're going to be going to LA soon to record a new album, yeah?
And he's the same guy that produced The Blues is going to produce this album along with a Nashville producer. So I'm excited. It's like a bi-coastal production. So
Now, before we go, where can our viewers find your music? Do you have a Facebook page or a website, or what do you have social media-wise that they can go to find your music?
yeah, if you would, please go to like my Facebook page, Woody Bradshaw, type that in, like it, and then you can follow the journey. We're going to do a lot of social media with this album. This album's going to be a lot more personal. It's going to have stuff that some singer-songwriter when I was younger, stuff that I kind of wasn't in country genre, but it will fit completely in this new record. And this new record is going to have a lot of commercial country stuff too, but a song about my mom and dad that's called Till the Pieces Fit, and it's wonderful. But yeah, Woody Bradshaw, like the page, and we'll document it and follow my journey on there. And then also we've got some new merchandise on my website. It's www.woodybradshaw.com, and it's Woodstruck Productions, and we got some great merch. I need to give you some.
Oh, good deal. Thank you, Woody. Thank you for being with us for this whole month of shows, playing with us.
My pleasure.
We'll be right back. Originally, Woody Bradshaw performed his single, The Last Thing You Do, in our studio live. But we had some gremlins on the set and faced some technical difficulties, and frankly, it didn't come out as good as we really liked. But here is The Last Thing You Do, on video. I love it. It ran through my head for like 3 days straight after I heard it the first time. I think it will in your head too.
Without saying goodbye, kept my eyes on the road and my fists clenched tight. It was all over something that didn't matter at all, but I just had to tell her that she was wrong. But then a car swerved, my life flashed right before my eyes. As I slammed on those brakes, a voice whispered inside, if the last thing you did was the last thing you do, if the last word you said was the last breath you drew, would you be okay with the way they remember you? If the last thing you did was the last thing you do. Had to catch my breath, thank God I was alive. Then 1,000 regrets ran through my mind, like my son's baseball game that I missed last night. All those times of working late, now I wondered why. Oh, and leaving this morning with no goodbye kiss, I sat there trembling, thinking what if the last thing you did was the last thing you do, if the last word you said was the last breath you drew, would you be okay with the way they remember you? If the last thing you did was the last thing you do. I pulled the car onto the shoulder, wiped a tear as I picked that phone up, told my wife how much I loved her, now I can't say it enough. 'Cause if the last thing you did was the last thing you do, if the last word you said was the last breath you drew, would you be okay with the way they remember you? If the last thing you did was the last thing you do, if the last thing you did was the last thing you do.